No, let's talk about neuroscience for a second.
Okay.
So SCARF is the idea that emotional pain hurts like physical pain.
Okay.
Social threats are processed like physical threats in our brains. And SCARF stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. These are the social constructs that people value. They value their status, they value having certainty, they value the ability to create safe connections with people. Equity is about making sure everybody has what they need to succeed versus giving everyone the same thing.
Okay, everybody, I am super excited for this episode. You can't get any more connected than this conversation right here. I am happy to have my brother, Peter Mostachetti, as today's guest on Connected Conversations. Peter, how are you, brother?
I'm good. How are you today?
I'm really good. I'm really happy to have my big brother here. This is the first time.
By the way, folks, big brother, I'm 5'9", he's 6'2".
That's it. He's my bigger brother in age and experience and wisdom. There you go. I just inflated your ego a little more than
I love it. I love it.
Peter is with us today. My brother Peter has a great deal of experience. He spent the bulk of his career at IBM. He recently transitioned into a new role. He does a lot of great stuff around leadership coaching, diversity and inclusion, and now he's tasked with some things about re-entry into the workplace, and I'm going to let him talk to that now. Peter, please give us your statement of qualification.
Alrighty, so my statement of qualification. I have been in the workforce now for over 25 years. I've spent time in technical leadership roles. I've been a delivery executive for a technical organization. I was working in cloud before cloud was a thing. I've spent a significant time in the latter portion of my career in leadership and executive development, executive succession. I am currently the director of organization learning and inclusion for Beauty for All Industries. We are the nexus of technology, marketing, and beauty. And in addition to that, I have worked with not-for-profits around building board leadership. I have spoken 4 times at the United Nations, and I am a licensed social worker in New Mexico, New York, and soon to be California.
I do believe you have a safe harbor kind of statement you would like to make here.
Yes, I do always like to preface these conversations that I am speaking for myself only. I am not speaking on behalf of my employer, and all opinions are my own.
As we start these podcasts, as you notice, because you're one of our top consumers of my content, right? You watch all of them, you take notes. How I start these is the connected workplace. Peter, what does the connected workplace mean to you?
So the connected workplace to me is how I describe my mission at work, which is I make sure that everyone has what they need to succeed. And that could be a lot of things. It could be learning. It could be a safe space to talk to someone. It could be, it's more than just the physical location of where you show up. It's making sure that you feel included and welcome wherever you are.
I love how you said the mission. That's your mission at work. And I think coming from the world I came from, workplace facilities, it was about moving somebody to a desk and providing a phone and providing a cube and providing an office. It's become far more than that. And then you made another statement. It's about providing a safe space for people to come back to. We just had a great podcast where we talk about the psychological effects of everything that just happened in the pandemic. So from your perspective, can you talk us through a little bit of what you view are the key components of providing that safe space as people return to the office?
So, it's important to remember that we're all people, that we've all just been through this massive global shared trauma.
Right.
So we've all been through this massive global shared trauma. And part of that is that we're all a little hypersensitive right now. If you had anything pre-pandemic, it's going to be magnified post-pandemic, and we're not even really out of the pandemic, but we're just getting back to where we want to be. And, so if social anxiety was something that you struggled with, you're going to struggle with it more now. If anxiety was something you struggled with, you probably found that ramped up during the pandemic. So, we've all got these things that are running around in our invisible backpack as a part of that pandemic. So let's just put that there first. We've got this stuff sitting in our invisible backpack. We've also gotten used to a certain way of working, and it's going to take time to build new habits. It's going to take time to build new practices. It's going to take time to build new routines. And it's really important that we have empathy for one another.
Right.
Conflicts will happen. People are going to get on your nerves. You're going to get stressed out and frustrated. I've been coming to the office now for about 2 months. I'm way more tired at the end of the day than I was previously. So there's a lot of new that we're all struggling with. Right. And the best resources all say, assume positive intent and be as empathetic as possible.
You make a really great point, because me and Fred were just talking about this, Fred, the producer of the show. And you think about how the pandemic hit and you had some resources who maybe just graduated college and they've never really been to the office for the company of which they work for, and they don't really understand the environment or how they're going to react to the environment. Say they get called in by their manager or supervisor to meet just for a brainstorming session. I can imagine that would be super nerve-wracking for that new resource who's never been to their office or never interacted in that space.
And Bob, that's empathy right there. That's putting yourself in the shoes of someone else to think about what are the scenarios that people might encounter that might be new for them, that might be different, that could either put more into that invisible backpack or maybe take something out. So that's really human-centered design. Mm-hmm. That's thinking about the experience of folks that we want them to have and understanding, what are they thinking? What are they feeling? What are they saying? What are they seeing? That's empathy. That's putting yourself in their shoes.
I love the idea of taking something out of the backpack instead of putting it into the backpack.
But the other thing we also want to think about is, how do people best work? When we think about the world of work, not everybody collaborates best face-to-face. And I think that's super important in the connected workplace and in how folks are transitioning back to the office, that we're really cognizant of making space for people to contribute in a way that's most meaningful to them. So if you're doing
that's come up across multiple streams of the podcast, make work meaningful. If you're going to be in the office, make sure there's a purpose to be in the office. If you go there and everybody feels like, well, that was something we could have done over Zoom, then the day was a waste. So I'm sorry, I didn't cut you off, but
but even more than that, when you're thinking about brainstorming ideas and you're doing some design thinking or, some user-centered design, make sure that you're thinking about, well, I want to make space for people to talk verbally, but I also want to make space for people to write things down, to put things into a Jamboard, to put things on a mural or a Trello, to have a chance to write or to speak based on how they're most comfortable working. So it's really about, number one, thinking about positions and power and authority. It's also about thinking on how do people best contribute in a way that's most meaningful to them.
But that requires a level of emotional intelligence. And I will say a lot of our mid-level managers today, and I think maybe me and you have talked about this, lack that emotional intelligence to understand what's the best way to approach a Bob versus somebody who just came out of college.
I think when we think about skills for the future, and we think about some of the most important skills that folks can have and personality behaviors, I think that empathy and emotional intelligence are at the top of the list.
Right.
I also think curiosity and having a learning orientation are at the top of the list. And both of those go together. If I am curious about the people I work with, if I'm curious about the people I lead, and I want to learn how best they can show up, about how best they can contribute, then I'm being emotionally intelligent, but I'm also being a curious learner.
I like the curious learner part, because that's what I've learned through this podcast. The creative aspect, creative is really hard because it's always subjective. It's not objective. I've been through this in other creative pursuits. But when I work with, again, I'm going to point back to Fred, the producer of this podcast. I come to Fred with ideas. Sometimes Fred likes the ideas and sometimes he doesn't like those ideas. And then I ask, a lot of times Fred asks me, why do you want to do that? The idea I have. And then I walk it back, and sometimes it's usually he asks me the why when it's not a good idea. Right. And then maybe he helps point me in a direction that is a good idea. So I think that curiosity aspect, when you are, to go back to what you're saying about brainstorming, is really important. Why? I'm curious about that.
I'd even, and here's how I could even make that sentence more powerful.
Okay. Coach me up.
All right. Well, so I always try to avoid the why.
Okay.
And why has a judgmental tone to it.
Okay.
So the flip to that is, what's the desired outcome?
Okay. Yeah. And he does that with me too. He goes, Is this outcome supposed to be related to the podcast or what we're trying to do with branding? And maybe I misworded it. But what is the desired outcome? So you basically, last things first, right? So
right.
last things first. Where are you?
Last things first. Yeah.
Where are you trying to get to?
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: as you transition your role, you spent a long time at IBM, right? Now you're in a new role. Some of your things that you're charged with, I would imagine, is bringing people back into the workplace. Aside from the conversation we just had about, how to collaborate, emotional, what are some of the other things that you're seeing that are important? And the other question I like to ask is, what's not important? Give us the hot take. I am so tired of buzzwords.
What's the outcome you're trying to achieve?
Okay.
Focus on the employee experience.
Yes.
Focus on how, why do people want to be there? Why do people want to be there? And again, back to my mission is, does everyone have what they need to succeed? The other thing is super important is this is a partnership. This is a partnership. It's the people folks. It's our HR business partners. It's our facilities team. It's the employees on the ground. It's listening. That's the most important thing. I'd say, actually, if I'm going to rescind what I just said, it's listening. It's listening to what employees want and need.
Okay.
And what's going to make a signature experience for them.
Have you done anything to solicit that feedback? Have you sent?
Constantly listening to employees, constantly asking employees what they need, what they want. That's actually one of the best things about this culture that I'm working at now is our employees are great about telling us what they like and what they want. And I love that. Yeah. I love feedback. And Bob, you just reminded me of something that I was thinking about earlier. Here's what's not important.
Okay.
And I'm going to link this back to something else we were talking about. You were sharing with me about going to Fred with ideas and collaborating. It's really important to be engaged, but not attached.
Right.
So not every idea is going to be a success. And I think that's the thing. Don't be so focused that every idea has to be a winner, that you miss out on the opportunities. So be engaged with what you're doing, but not attached to it such that it becomes part of your self-identity.
I know you're not a big sports guy, but I was just listening to a podcast where they were talking about a shooter in basketball. And
that's the game with the ice, right?
That's the game where they shoot the ice over the goalpost, and it's
thank you. Yeah. And they host those in stadiums, I think.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, great.
Whichever. But the shooter, what the veteran was saying, the young guys have to get over missing the shots. It's like, you miss a shot, you need to move on, play defense, get ready for the next shot. It's the same idea. It's the same idea with an idea, right? They're not all going to be winners, and it's okay. It's no big deal. Yeah.
I mean, and I try to live my whole work life being engaged with my work, but not attached to it.
Okay. So how do
because
you
then I'm open for feedback.
So how do you do that?
Practice.
Practice.
Everything is practice.
Right.
Practice and feedback, practice and feedback, practice and feedback. Being really open to feedback. There's no bad feedback. I mean, feedback can be horribly delivered. It can be horribly phrased, but there's always something good in there. And our responsibility is to at least dance with that feedback before we decline it. Every single skill I have came through practice and feedback.
One of the things I struggle with, and when I always say, please don't give me direct reports, because it's been my experience. Anytime I bring feedback, and maybe it's a me thing, maybe it's not a them thing, but I felt like people almost took feedback in a way like it hurt, like it and they didn't do what you're describing. And I always try to start with, okay, here's the positive, here's what you did good, and here's some areas to improve. And that typically goes over well. But sometimes if you're a little too matter of fact, and this is blown up in my face where it's like, this is the feedback, this is why I'm giving this feedback, and that's it. It doesn't really go over too well. And sometimes I'm a little too straight to the point.
Let's talk about neuroscience for a second.
Okay, let's do it.
So in neuroscience, and I'm riffing off of an idea that was developed by Dr. David Rock and the Neuro Leadership Institute. NLI talks about SCARF. Okay. And so SCARF is the idea that emotional pain hurts like physical pain. Okay. Social threats are processed like physical threats in our brains. And so social threats are processed in the same way in our brains, the same way as physical threats. So same neurochemicals, same pathways, creates that fight or flight defensive mechanism. And SCARF stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness.
Okay.
And so these are the social constructs that people value. They value their status, they value having certainty, they value the ability to create safe connections with people, the ability to decide their own work and how autonomous they are, and fairness. Is it equitable? Not is it equal, is it equitable?
That's come up a lot. Equitable work has come up. Can you speak a little bit on equitable work?
So equitable versus equal is, if you think about it, equal is everybody gets the same chair.
Yep.
At a conference table. But equitable is somebody might get a chair. Somebody might get a chair that's more suited to a back problem that they have. Somebody might get a space for a wheelchair as opposed to a chair. So equity is about making sure everybody has what they need to succeed versus giving everyone the same thing.
I thought it meant that you felt like you were getting some equity back from the work that you're doing for whatever organization or company you work for.
I could see that. I could see that idea. If you're thinking about, well, so that's equity versus equitable. So equity means investment in my mind. Okay. So I'm putting in an investment, I'm getting equity back as the return on investment for the work that I'm doing. I'm getting value. I would also liken that to purpose-driven work. I feel that my work is aligned with my purpose.
Yeah. That's probably a better way to describe what I just described. And again,
equity is fairness.
Again, like when you see these terms, and I think that is a term or that I think is important, right? This is one of those things we've just been so beaten over the head on LinkedIn. It's even bleeding its way into mainstream media about the hybrid work environment and flexible work, and some people even saying return to work mistakenly. Well, we've been working, it's return to office. And that's where some people are missing out on these things. And it's just what I'm really trying to do with this podcast is wade through what is important and what is just noise, if you will. Yeah. And a lot of things we've already touched on. Now you took it one step further because of your background in counseling. You understand things like the invisible backpack, right? Yeah. We have these things that we carry with us, and then the pandemic magnifies it. And then I think leaders, and I don't think it's happening, Peter. I don't think and this is not me saying this just because you're my brother. There aren't as many. They're out there. I can name a couple. I have some friends that are very good in their leadership roles. I have one woman who always describes herself as a servant leader, and I believe it. It's not just her on LinkedIn putting this out there. She really, really puts that foot forward, and I think she delivers on it. But I don't think the bulk of mid-level management going up the chain even further to the executive level in today's day and age really approach things this way. I think we're getting there. I think people like you, and as the generations move up in the leadership and the org chart, we get that. The point I'm trying to get to, Peter, is how do we get there? How do we get more people thinking this way?
Well, so I think the first thing is leaders need to recognize that it's behavior that matters. You can say what you want, but it's behavior that matters. And your folks are watching you, whether you think they are or not, they're watching you. Behavior matters and authenticity matters.
Yeah.
If you're, I always, whenever I'm helping folks to get better at communications or presentations, I tell them, if you're not funny, don't try to be.
Right.
Because it's not authentic and it's going to land like a lead balloon.
Right.
So authenticity matters. Behavior matters. It's not about what you say, it's about what you do. And again, if I'm looking at leaders endemically, the most valuable skills that leaders can have is emotional intelligence and curiosity.
I can't agree with you more. I cannot agree with you more, because I spent the better half, the better chunk of my last 15 years in sales. Right.
Yeah.
Now I've transitioned more into a hybrid strategy role where I do a little bit of everything, including this podcast. But a lot of times what happens is if you're good at sales, you're then promoted to be a sales manager. And it's like, I never really understood that. And a lot of the sales managers I work for are the exact opposite. It's what's the numbers? When's this deal going to close? Who's your champion? What's the compelling event? Those kind of things. Never the, hey, what's going on? How you doing? How are things going at home? How was that last trip? Did the meeting go well? Did you feel like it was a comfortable, receptive audience? The questions I get is, when are they signing? And it's like,
yeah, I'll tell you, Bob, one of the things, and I loved this about IBM. So if I'm looking back at my career, IBM always implemented sales coaching. So all of their sales managers took sales coaching classes. Right. Because coaching as a manager is the most important skill that you can have. Mm-hmm. And it really comes down to, if as a manager or a leader, you can switch into a coaching way of approaching things. And Michael Bungay Stanier talks about this a lot in his book, The Coaching Habit. Okay. If you can move to a coaching perspective, then you find you have less to-dos. And don't we all want less to-dos?
Yeah. So you're saying if you move in a way that you're coaching your resources as opposed to dictating and telling them what to do, you're building up that confidence in them to go do what needs to be done, and in turn it makes your job easier.
Right. And it's I won't say it's easy, but it's as easy as switching your language a little bit. Kind of like what you and I talked about, versus saying, why are you doing that? What are your desired outcomes?
Okay.
That's moving into a more coaching.
Can you give another example?
Sure.
Give us an example the wrong way and then the right way, because I want people to learn from this podcast.
So a supervisor or a manager who's saying, did you do this, do this, do this, do this? Okay. So what have you tried? How'd that work out for you? All three very powerful coaching questions. My favorite coaching question, help me understand.
Help me understand. Yes. I had a very intelligent person once say to me, when you start a conversation where maybe there's some tension or something, I'm curious. Mm-hmm. I'm curious as to why you said what you said. I'm curious as to why you framed it that way. I'm curious as to why you sent that email. That would be the correct way of doing things.
Yeah.
Instead of what's your problem? Well, that's the wrong way, right?
Yeah, no.
That's the wrong way.
God,
What's your problem, pal?
I feel like I was just channeling our father right there, by the way.
Just screams.
Oh.
Solve any problem by screaming. Screaming and freaking out solves all the problems. But at the end of the day, maybe if you maybe it does lead your children to seek knowledge and understanding to become emotionally intelligent. So their first response isn't to scream, yell, and throw a fit. So I guess with this opportunity, right? I work in the corporate real estate space. We talked about emotional intelligence. We talked about that invisible backpack. We talked about the shared trauma. We talked about approaching things from a curious standpoint. What else would you have to offer in your infinite wisdom? Again, juicing you up a little bit. In your infinite wisdom, you have a platform now to kind of talk to the people who deliver the workplace across multiple industries. What message do you have for them?
I would actually say make sure it's a delightful experience.
Love it.
And this is purely what I look for, what Peter looks for. I want to be delighted. I want a workplace that's bright and comfortable. I don't want to have to search for the things that I need. Right. I want, folks who are, excited to be there too and help out. And, snacks are good.
Snacks are very good.
Snacks are very good.
So with that said, Peter, again, you approach your role as a mission. You focus on leadership, developing and coaching resources that work for you. Yep. We all have to be cognizant of the invisible backpack we wear. Yep. We all went through a shared trauma. We have to approach resources differently in the new modern workplace. We have to solicit feedback from our employees. We have to have emotional intelligence. We have to be curious. And at the same time, as you wrapped it up so eloquently, our corporate real estate leaders and our workplace leaders really need to delight their employees in order to retain their employees. So with that, Peter, I'm going to express a little bit of gratitude. Anytime I ever need anything in terms of leadership or interpersonal coaching, I always come to you. I think this session was fantastic, and I am very grateful to have the opportunity to share the wealth of knowledge that my big brother has with my audience, and hopefully a little bit of my pizzazz and charisma with your audience, and people wow, he's really charming and debonair. I don't know if people use those adjectives anymore.
I think you're showing your age, Bob, a little bit with charming and debonair. But I will also say that, for on the flip side, you are an incredibly emotionally intelligent person. And you do seek feedback. That's actually really important in a leader is you actually look for feedback and you're very open to it. I would also say that, when we think about feedback, it's most successful when we can pull the emotion out of it. So
detachment, you said that earlier in the podcast. Yep. So thank you very much. This is the most connected conversation you can ever have, as me and my Peter come from the same gene pool. So with that, I'm Bob Mostachetti. This is Connected Conversations with Nuvola. I want to thank my brother for being here, and we really appreciate everybody for coming along on this ride with us. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time on the interwebs.